My name is Jamin. I'm your first friend in Alaska. Luckily for you, I'm also an associate real estate broker in South Central Alaska. The Matsu Valley. We need to talk about the Matsu Valley today and what's going on in the real estate market here, looking specifically at the single family, the land, and the multifamily. There's a lot going on here, and this continues to be one of the more interesting markets to be watching in the entire state of Alaska. Before we get started, though, do make sure you give this video a like, subscribe, and let's jump into it. The first thing I want to look at is what's going on in the single family market, and in the single family market for the inventory that's available, we see that this time last year there's about 605 pieces of property that were available, and this year it's about 556 units that are available. Now, looking historically, we would expect to see anywhere, actually about 820 upwards of about 900 available. So we're still just like barely halfway over of what we would normally expect to see, and in the Matsu Valley, but I'll take it. One thing to really keep in mind with the Matsu Valley, though, our inventory here has increased at a better rate than what you've seen in most other places. And really, I think what's helped that a lot is just the inventory has been helped by a lot of the new construction going on in the Matsu Valley, because the Matsu is very, very favorable, very friendly towards new construction and business. And so you've seen a lot of that move out here, and I think that's really doing a lot to help the inventory increase. Now, just because we see a property that's on the MLS, it's on the market, does not mean it actually exists, because a lot of builders aren't really building spec homes. They've got a piece of land and they've got pictures from a previous house that they built, and they'll put that out there. Ground has not even been broken yet on it, so just because it's on the MLS, don't think that means it exists. Okay, you got to look a little bit closer. Next thing we want to look at is the number of properties that are actually selling, and this time last year it was about 174, and this year it's right about 189. So despite the inventory being lower, we do see that we are seeing an increased number of properties that are actually selling. And about 189, that's honestly right about in the neighborhood of what we would normally see with the inventory being higher prior to COVID, because around then it was about 200, about 206. So the fact that we're about 190, we're on right about where we are normally, even with the inventory being a lot higher back then. Next, we see that the average sold price for single-family properties in the Matsu Valley increased from about $413,000 this time last year to about $443,000 this year, which means we've seen an increase of about 7.2% for the average sold price year to date. Now, this is a pretty healthy appreciation. If anything, I think I'd actually like to see this down just a little bit more, because once you start getting into the sevens, that might be increasing in a little hotter of a rate than we want to go. I think really what we're seeing here is the results of having a lot of new construction selling, like I've mentioned before. And obviously when you're selling and buying new construction, that is going to be like the top shelf price that you're going to get from the market. And you start selling a lot of that, then it's going to make these prices go up. I think we're still sitting at a pretty healthy level for, if you bought a property a couple of years ago, it's appreciated pretty well. I don't know if it's gone up by quite that much, just because we're factoring in the average sold price for all of these new construction homes as well. Let's go and switch gears real quick and talk about raw land in the Matsu Valley. So raw land in the Matsu Valley is a pretty big part of the market here, because this really is where there's a lot of land to be had. Now, looking at the number of lots that are currently available, there were about 644 available this time last year and about 624 available this year. This is really down from where we'd see historically, because normally we'd see anywhere from, we'll say, about 1,100 up to about 1,200. So we're really not seeing anywhere close to where we're at, where we were at prior to COVID. And I don't really see that changing anytime in the near future. Do keep in mind, though, all these lots, they're single lots, and I don't know if it's each lot is 100 acres or a quarter acre. I just really don't know based off of this. Next, we see that the number of pieces of raw land that sold went from 76 this time last year to 66 this year. So seeing a bit of a decrease there. Still a pretty healthy demand for the number of pieces of raw land out there in general. Normally, prior to COVID, we'd see anywhere from about 50 to about 80. So being right around that 66, I mean, we're about where we normally would be, even with the inventory being about double what it was back then. Now let's talk about the average sold price for the raw land here in the Matsu Valley. This time last year, it was $85,000. This year, it's about $100,000, which means, I don't really need the math much on this one. It's increased by, what was that, like 18, 19%, something like that. Now, again, I want to caveat that by just saying we don't know going off of this if we're talking about the 100-acre parcel or if we're talking about like a bunch of like little like half-acre parcels. So just because the average sold price has gone up here doesn't necessarily mean everything else across the board has increased as well, but that's what we're seeing just at the averages right now. It would not surprise me if the average sold price, like if you had 1-acre parcel, you could probably sell it for slightly more this year than what you could the year before. But I don't think we've seen, like, just because it was like, we'll say $100,000 this time last year, doesn't mean it's suddenly worth $118,000 this year. I think it really comes down to the size of the lots that are being sold here. They're kind of throwing a bit of the numbers off because that's kind of what builders are looking for at the moment. Oh, let's go ahead and take a break here real quick. If you're watching this channel, I sure hope, first off, if you're watching here from out of state, welcome. Also, if you're here in the state right now, we do have a meetup that we do host once a month for folks that have recently moved up here to Alaska. And we usually just go do simple stuff like hikes, blueberry picking, ice fishing, kind of stuff like that. It's just an opportunity to get out and kind of enjoy yourself and visit people and start building those networks. So if you'd like to be a part of that, make sure that you go join the Meetup Facebook group. Link for that is in the description section down below, and you'll be able to join the group and then get all the updates for all the fun stuff we're going to be doing in the future. Okay, all done there. Let's keep it moving. All right, switching gears again, let's take a look at what's going on in multifamily for the Matsu Valley. This time last year, there were 41 properties available on the market. This year, it's 38. Now, looking historically, prior to COVID, we would expect to see about 60 to about 85 properties available on the market. So we have got a long way to go as far as inventory goes, but, is what it is. Next, we see that the number of multifamily properties that have actually sold went from 6 this time last year to 12 this year. So even with the inventory being so low, we are still seeing a pretty high demand for multifamily properties in the Matsu Valley. I think a big part of that is you've got so many people just trying to move out here that the value of these multifamily properties is increasing. Now, if we look historically, we'd expect to see anywhere from about 8 to about 19. So, prior to COVID, so 12 is actually right about there where we normally would see, even with the inventory being so much lower now than what it was then. Last but not least, let's talk average sold price. So for the average sold price for multifamily properties in the Matsu Valley, it went from about $601,000 this time last year to about $642,000 this year. So the fact that these, the multifamily market is more expensive, I've noticed, in the Matsu Valley than what it's been in other places, other markets like Anchorage and Eagle River for the most part. I think the reason we're seeing that is probably these are more actual true multifamily properties. They're like fourplexes and not like the little single family that they kind of tortured and reconfigured to try to turn into a duplex. I think these are real true fourplexes and multifamily properties they have over in the Matsu Valley, and that's why they're more expensive on average than what you're going to see in the Anchorage and the Eagle River market. And also, I'm going to say, you can see with the numbers here, the value of these properties do continue to go up. And like I said, the reason for that is you've got a lot of people trying to move from Anchorage. They're tenants, they got to move somewhere. And so that creates a lot of demand for these multifamily properties. And the rents can go up. And that really ultimately is what determines the value for these multifamily properties. Okay. Let's go ahead and give you the summary real quick. What are the big takeaways? Well, for me, if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at this market, I know I've got a lot more options here in the Matsu than I'm going to have really anywhere else in the state, and that does give me a lot of encouragement. And also, I understand that if there's a property and it's a solid property, I'm going to be ready to still compete. Not as hard as we had to do back in 2021. But if you're someone who's willing to just get in there and cut it up and compete if you need to, you're going to have much better success than just trying to find, the properties that nobody else wants. I've got news for you. Everyone's got the same access to the search apps and the World Wide Web, and there's really no secrets when it comes to real estate these days. You're not going to sneak one over on anyone and just get in when no one's looking. You're probably going to have to compete if it's a really good one, or you're going to have to be happy with just having a house that nobody else wants for whatever reason. If you're a seller, I really do like this market. I think it's a great indication for where the market is heading here. If you're wanting to sell, you got to be careful not to overplay your hand, because I do see that happening with some folks, and they do end up coming down on their price. Once you come down into reality, it's usually gone pretty quick. But the market is not going to let you get away with asking too much for your property. It's going to look at you and just look at you and look at you until eventually you come to reality and come down on the price. Now, for those of you watching online and you see price cuts, and I can hear the comment section now, I'm seeing price cuts all the time, and I get that. It's got to be real confusing for people out there, looking at just what they're seeing on Zillow and these other websites without having the context. But here's the thing. Properties they're looking at. Let's say that it's a property, they were asking $420, they came down to $400, and they were able to get it to sell. Okay, that looks like they've made a price cut, and it looks like prices are falling. En contraire, because this time last year, they would have started out they got $400 for it this year. They probably would have got $380 for it the year before. So even though, yes, they started high, they came down and were able to sell it there, but there was a $20,000 cut in their asking price. That is not indicative of how much it actually would have sold for the previous year. And it's only the sold price that we're looking at, okay? Just ignore the asking price. It's not a good indicator where the market's actually at right at the moment, once we're looking at kind of the health of it. This has been my market update. I sure hope it's been useful. Give me a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and all that. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.